Good afternoon, everyone. We're now live.
We're just gonna keep shocking until Jake gets here. Hey, I need a haircut. I need to come see you.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Tati.
Tati. Hey, Tati, you guys are next on Friday.
Hi,
Oh,
Tati.
man. I'm gonna have 2 babies on that one. That one's gonna be
my
insane. With Riley. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Yes, please cut my hair. I mean, look at my hair. My hair needs to, like, get there. Yes. Bun, yes, just like Jared and his bun. Is Jared still asleep from yesterday? From the video you sent me. That was so good. All right, here we go.
Our guest
We
of
have
honor.
Jake. Let's do this.
Yoo-hoo. That's you.
What's up?
Hey! Jake, what
How you
is
guys
going
doing?
on? How are you, man?
Good, man. Just trying to stay cool right now. It's just so hot out.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
You have been running around like crazy. So for anybody tuning in who doesn't know, it was Jake's birthday 3 days ago. That was like on Wednesday, Thursday?
It was Friday. Yeah.
Friday.
Oh, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
And fun fact, Jake shares a birthday with...
My wife. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we're birthday
Yeah.
twins.
That's...
No way, that's so cool. My sister and her husband are both birthday twins and actual twins because they're the
Oh,
same
no
age
way.
and the same year. Yeah.
That's rad.
Yeah. So we immediately thought of her sister when we saw that it was your guys' birthday. So it's pretty cool. Like, you had your birthday and you're running around. You're doing all the things that you've been doing. But thank you for taking some time to talk story with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm stoked. It's gonna be fun. And yeah, were you guys able to get in the water today too, or no?
Oh, it was so good. So the last 2 days have just been really good. And I trunk it. So I haven't worn a wetsuit since like January.
Dude, I wore a full suit today, and it felt like I was inside of a sauna.
You're dying, right?
Yeah, I was dying.
I
I had called Surf Report last night, and I was like, oh, like, let's see what the water is. And they said 64, and I was like,
Right.
sweet, I'm going to wear, like, a spring suit or something. And then I woke up this morning, and they said 61, and I was like, oh, it's going to be cold. I paddled out in a full suit, and I was just, like, dunking myself the entire session.
Oh, I'm sure. See, I get the opposite. So I paddle out usually around Balsa. I have the tower where all the uncles are at. And they know me because I don't have a wetsuit. They want to start a GoFundMe to buy me a wetsuit. But I actually
That's
have a lot of
hilarious.
wetsuits. And they always look at me like, you're crazy. So I came paddling out. And they were all burning up just like you. And I looked at them smiling. And I said,
Yeah.
I told you guys it would be warm. Oh, my goodness. Well, Jake, we obviously know you pretty well. But for the people that haven't, gotten a chance to know you, why don't you give them a little intro about who you are and what you've been up to?
Yeah. So I grew up in Huntington, and about when I was a junior in high school, I felt the call to ministry. And when I was a senior at Huntington, I actually had the opportunity to run FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, on the Huntington High campus. And it was where I really got a taste for ministry and kind of got to lead out and run a team of fellow peers and high school students doing that. And at that same time, kind of the summer before, I started volunteering with the junior high ministry at First Christian Church. And then kind of through that process, made my decision to go to Hope International University and study biblical studies. And then kind of just continued to serve in the junior high ministry at First Christian. And then one of my good friends, Nate, who was our junior high pastor, he was like, I'm done. I'm bailing out. He wanted to be out of ministry. And so I was an intern for about a year. And then like 9 months into it, they were like, hey, Nate's going to leave. And so we want you to step into this role. And I was like, oh, 100%. Like, I would love to. And so it was crazy, working at my home church is like a huge blessing. Like, I know so many people that don't get that opportunity. And then, I've been overseeing junior high for 3 years now. And then actually last night was our high school pastor's last night, and so I'm actually stepping into high school in the next
Oh,
in the
Very
next.
cool.
So basically, once quarantine is over, once we're back on campus and everything, I'll be taking over our high school. But right now, I'm doing junior high and high school. So
nice.
Oh
yeah,
Oh
wow.
my goodness. So you do have a lot on your plate. And you,
yeah,
was that the graduations you were doing the other day?
yeah. We were doing all our high school graduation. We were doing like a little drive-through for them. From like Monday through Friday last week. And then this week, we're actually doing it for our junior high students. So I saw uh, 3 kids today. I saw 4 today. I'm seeing 2 tomorrow, and then a couple more throughout the week. So we're just kind of stopping by. We actually got them a copy of Bob Goff's Everybody Always,
Nice.
which is actually really crazy because it speaks so much to our current situation of just going out and loving everyone.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And how's that been? I mean, with the transition to going remote and having the junior highs and the high schools kind of tune in. A lot of the churches are doing Zooms and they're doing things and they're streaming. Talk about how your team has been able to handle that and what kind of growth you guys have seen.
Yeah. So if you asked me 3 months ago if I was going to be a social media influence pastor for my life, I would have never, I would have never thought so. You know, um,
Yeah.
it's it's crazy because I think a lot of churches, ours included, really saw social media as, or even like our live stream as kind of, hey, this is a backup for people if they miss church, and it's like that's what it's for. But what we've realized throughout this process and throughout quarantine is that online is actually you can have the most committed people that go to your church online. And so um, and our senior pastor has been super upfront with this, and I think a lot of churches have been upfront that it was immediately we had to pivot real quick. Our natural reaction for youth was to film videos and get those videos going. So we would post a YouTube video every Wednesday, which was when our junior high program normally meets, and then our high school was doing that Sundays. And then I watched a sermon by Stephen Furtick, and he was interacting with his audience through YouTube comments, and I was like, wow, that's like really impressive and really interesting. Like, I would love to try that. And so I approached like our executive, and I was like, hey, I would love to try this. Like, I would love to go live, and like live, dropping a video was cool, but it wasn't super cool because it's just a screen that they're interacting with. Whereas this one, so we decided to go live stream. And so now we have, a live game, we can do live teaching, we can do live worship with our kids. And so it's basically myself, a few tech people, and then we have our worship leaders in the room as well. So there's like 5 of us in this room, all social distanced, and we make that super clear. And then, yeah, we're just kind of running a live stream service, and then we post it to our YouTube, so students can go back and watch it if they missed it. But it's, we play a game and we interact with their comments, kind of do stuff like that. And so it's been really interesting to kind of flesh out, like, what does it mean to do ministry in the middle of like a pandemic and do it successfully. And I think, I don't want to brag, but I think we've done a really good job. Like, and I think a lot of churches are doing really great jobs right now in the sense of being, an actual campus, but also being an online venue for people too.
Sure. And I love how you touch on the fact that you're going live and you're specific about that as opposed to videos. We think live builds communities because it's so interactive. Kind of walk me through the importance of community and how you've seen FCC and just your local community in particular. You've been in there, you've been in church for quite some time. Talk about growing up in that and how you've seen growth.
Yeah, I think growing up in Huntington's a weird place because it's like You know, it's like a wealthy community that's not trying to be wealthy.
Right.
It's
Oh.
like it's like a weird in the fact of we're a beach town that's like kind of hippie-ish, but also like very wealthy at the same time. So I grew up um, really in a great household, honestly. My parents gave me every opportunity they could. I went to a private Christian school growing up, and then when it came to high school, went to Huntington High, and then got to go to private college. And I had, you know, so much opportunity because of where I was located, because of my parents, you know, had kind of set this up for us to be really successful. But yeah, I think the community aspect, no matter how hard and how far away you go, there it's always there. The big one that I saw recently was Casey Wheat passing away. Casey is a huge person in our community, and um, I went and surfed the morning after he had everyone had found out he passed away, and I had never seen community come together so strong. And that was just like that was not even like Christian people. That was just like surfers that cared about Casey. Um, and so it's really interesting because a lot of the church world, a lot of people don't surf. It's really interesting because I actually had went out to a conference last May in Atlanta, and I was looking at everyone's shoes, and I was there was like 15,000 people at this conference, and I'm pretty sure I was the only guy wearing Vans, and I was like, what?
Yes.
I was like, what is happening?
That's awesome.
But it was funny, but yeah, I have. Sorry, I
Oh,
got a
you're
call.
good. You're good.
But I have so many different communities that I've plugged into. You know, I have my surf community, I have my FCC community, I have you know, the people that like I have family, I have all these different communities, but at the same time they all kind of interweave with each other.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people that go to my church that surf, and it's like uh, you never would have pictured, you know, I'll get a random kind of phone call or something, and they'll be like, hey, like I didn't know you worked at the church, and I was like, oh yeah, I've been working there for like 3 years, and they're like, I had no idea. And it's funny because I was attending a men's event one day, and one of the guys who goes to our church, we ended up somehow going to the same tattoo artist and had no idea that we went to each other's church and like got the same tattoo artist, and we surfed the same place. And it's just
So cool.
it was just so crazy how all these connections have been made throughout life. And I just think yeah, there's like so many different communities that I'm plugged into, but at some point they also like always connect. You see like, and I think what it really teaches me is like, there's always people around you that care about you.
Absolutely.
Oh, amen.
We talked about this yesterday, and I kind of want to touch base again. And I think multiple communities is the perfect segue because you talked about multiple gifts. In addition to being an incredible surfer and you having this devout faith, you said that you had so many talents in other areas, but yet you felt this passion and this call to pursue one particular area, but you still share your gifts. Talk to me about all these multiple gifts and the ability that you can use them in the multiple communities that you're part of.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really learned, and I was actually like thinking about it today too, was, and when we talked yesterday, I really emphasized this, is that a lot of people tend to think, I think there's this overall kind of idea about what a pastor is like to most people, and I think most people think that a pastor kind of just goes to church and sits in their office and writes a sermon, and I think a lot of people, like maybe for some people that's true. I know for like my community of people that's not true, but I think over time what I've realized is like at first when I entered ministry, it was like, jump full into your gift of teaching and don't talk about anything else. And then when I was, growing up and doing contests and surfing and all that stuff, it was like, okay, talk about your surf life, but don't talk about your faith. And something that I've realized throughout the process of just, I think, growing up and becoming more mature in my life and in my faith is realizing that there is nothing wrong with having multiple gifts, and being okay with those multiple gifts. And I remember I read a book by Brene Brown, and she had pointed to another book. I can't remember the name of the book right now. I think it's called One Person, Multiple Careers. And I think what is super cool about what this author had said is, in America, we are tied. Most people get their identity from their work. And I think that's very, very true in our society today. But she was talking about how it is, and I think this is true, that people are born with multiple gifts. And so those multiple gifts you can use in different career paths. And so she adopts this thing that she calls the slash life. And the slash life is, I'll give an example of, I am a pastor, I am a surfer, I am a husband, I am a brother, I am a son, like all these different definitions of who I am, and not one single thing of that defines my life. And so my surf career doesn't define everything about my life. My, pastoral role doesn't define everything about my life. My, relationship with my family doesn't define everything about my life. And she talks about it, I took it in a different spin, but she talks about it in the sense of, you can be, pastor, pizza delivery guy, and have all these multiple careers that you just think is amazing. And I think a lot of what we're seeing throughout quarantine is that this exists too, is that, people are working from home. Maybe they've had to pick up a new job, or maybe they're working multiple jobs. And what's really cool to me and inspiring about that is knowing that I don't have to be a one-dimensional person. And I think we, like, not only me, but I think like people in the world think that they are one-dimensional, and they are not. I think there is, gifts that a lot of us have, and you should not be afraid to use all those gifts. I have used the gift of surfing to glorify what God has given me, those talents. I love taking photography. Sometimes I take really good photos. Sometimes they're horrible, and so I think like using those gifts is so important. And I think what I've learned is every job has prepared me for what I'm doing right now. I worked at HSS and I worked at a surf shop. So I got really, really good at talking to people, not only about surfboards, but about like, why are you buying this board, or why are you doing this? And making that deep connection with people and getting to have real conversation, which to me, that's when you actually have an opportunity to talk to someone about your life and your faith and all that stuff. But I think it all entangles in a different kind of way, because you are not a one-dimensional person. I am not a one-dimensional person. And if you take that from a scientific standpoint of, yeah, this entire world is three-dimensional, but we have, subjected ourselves to say that we are one-dimensional, and say that this career defines what I do, when I think that, God is probably calling us all to something so much bigger than just one specific thing.
Right. That's a great point. I actually want to get into, I want to go deeper into that whole one dimension, especially with Christians, right? Because when a non-believer sees a Christian, they paint this picture of what you cannot do. It's a lifestyle of abstaining from things, right? So
Yeah.
being a surfer and a Christian, if you don't know any better, they think, oh, that's not possible because surfers party and they do this. But then being a Christian, you abstain from other things. So talk to me about how being a Christian isn't one-dimensional. And I guess to give you a little bit of background, for us, we started doing social media because we wanted to glorify Jesus through social media and say, hey, we go to Disneyland, we surf, we go to church, we hang out with friends, because as you may well know, and for other people tuning in, when you go on social media and you scroll on that home page, that explore page, you know what you see.
Yeah.
It's the same content over and over and over. So we wanted to say, hey, we do fun things too as Christians. It isn't this stereotype of, okay, we only listen to sermons and we stay locked in our room reading the Bible. So kind of talk to me about the non-one-dimensional Christians and what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, so something that it's really funny because me and our senior pastor, we are kind of on the same wavelength all the time, and it's so odd because we'll both like point out things and we just crack up about it. And I had really come to this conclusion in Bible college. I absolutely love doing biblical studies. I'm a total nerd. Just have to throw that out there for everyone.
Same.
That's what all of us are.
But
we went to CBU at Cal Baptist. So
yeah.
Same.
So one of the things that I have really, in the past year, maybe 2 years, have really started to believe wholly is that in John, Jesus, I can't specifically reference, that happens to me too. Everyone, I don't know the Bible front and back.
Same. That's okay. No problem, man.
And so one of the things that has really to me stuck out is that verse in John where Jesus talks about, I have come that so you can have life to the full. That Jesus, his and God's desire for you and I and for everyone is to live a full life. Amen. And to me, what a full life means is when Jesus talks about everything on the Sermon on the Mount and says, you heard it was said this, but actually I'm going to raise the bar and this is now the new standard. Sure, he has that new standard, but he also says there's two really important aspects that you get out of any of this is loving God and loving your neighbor. And to me, when he lays out the rest of those laws, and people love to hang up on these, you're a Christian, so you don't do this. But I look at it and I say, I'm a Christian and yeah, I don't do that, but I don't do it because of what Christ has done for me. My only response to what Jesus has done for me is to literally follow behind him. And I think that to me, when we actually live out what Jesus talks about and what Jesus says and even what the disciples and the apostles said, I think that, and I share this with my students all the time, is the reason why Jesus says those things is, I think there's 3 reasons behind them. I think 1, he's asking you to experience less heartbreak. Number 2, he's asking and telling us, if you do this, you'll experience less pain in the world. And 3, you'll experience less heartbreak, less pain, and just you'll experience life actually to the full. We weren't meant to do a lot of the things that we do in the world. I don't think drugs are a good thing. I don't think you live your full life when you take drugs. I don't think that you live your full life when you spend your, every Friday night going and partying and ending up in a meaningless relationship with someone. That, to me, that's not a full life. And so, to me, when I think Jesus says, I have come so that you can live life to the full, I wholeheartedly believe that those commandments or statements that he lays out are we should live them because we'll experience so much more life when we do.
Amen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's great advice, and especially in the place that you're coming from, because you have so much influence to the junior high and high school ministry. So I guess my first part is, did you always have a heart for that age group? When you were growing up and you had that call your junior year, was that the one, was it hey, I grew up in this neighborhood and I've seen kids come to the beach and I'd love to talk story with them. How did you how did you have a heart for them?
Yeah, I think my junior high pastor was amazing. He's still on our staff. His name's Matt, and he's our executive. And I think the reason why I was really drawn to junior high, and I mean, I've been working with junior high for 7 years. So, and to work with junior high for 7 years, you got to love them. You know, you got to absolutely love being with them. And I do. And they're amazing. And they're awesome. They're awkward. They're funny. They tell you the funniest poop jokes in the world. And it's like so entertaining. But I think like when I was growing up, when I started to attend FCC, which was in middle school, Matt was literally the most loving and caring person that I'd met, and really, to me, had taught me the love of Jesus. And that was like really the first time that I encountered that, even though I grew up, you know, being in a Christian home. I think that was the place where I experienced like, oh, church is like home. And so I remember asking Matt, like, graduated 8th grade or promoted 8th grade. And I was like, hey man, when can I come back? And he's like, what do you mean, can you come back? And I was like, oh, I would like love to volunteer with you. And he's like, oh, like I have to have you wait. You know, we usually wait until students are out, like 2 years is what we say. And then Matt was like, hey, and I think even when I was wanting to volunteer, it was like, I think I had to be like 18 to work with junior high students. Sure. And so I wanted to be back in youth group, you know, like I was like, this is so awesome. And so that was always my heart. And I think I started in 2013 or summer of 2012 or 2013. And like, just was like, this is awesome. This is so much fun. And, yeah, we went through the people who stood beside me on my wedding day, I all met because we were in ministry together. Like we all did junior high together. They're still the people that I call, you know, when I need something, when I'm questioning something. And that, to me, like, I think ministry is really interesting. And what's really cool is my friend Alan, he's an amazing guitar player. He was our worship leader for a little bit. Him and I don't have really, like, we have commonalities. We have commonalities of like, we both love Jesus, and, you know, we both love Star Wars. We're both like total nerds about that stuff. But like, what I've seen is a common thread with all the people I've worked with and done junior high with is we're very different, but the common thread is that like we all love Jesus, and we're all like striving to get this next generation to love Jesus as well. And like when I think when that happens, and I think that's the commonality, nothing else matters. You know, politically, whatever you like, to me, it's like I lay it out on the table, and it's like I have a stance on Jesus of like he died and rose again, but like other than that, everything else is kind of a conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. There is a question that Baby Yoda wants to ask.
Yes.
Oh my God. Star Wars nerd, so I thought I'd bring in Baby
Love
Yoda.
that.
So Baby Yoda's question is, this time is one of the most pivotal in your life, right? The whole junior high and high school. That's where that can shape a person. So what advice can you give to junior high and high school kids coming in that are new to the whole thing, that are on the fence, or maybe just accepting Christ, or maybe they're scared? Yeah. I'm sure you get that quite a bit, where it's like, Jake, you know, I don't know, like I don't want to lose my friends, or hey Jake, I think I'm losing my friends because I'm talking more outwardly about Jesus, and they make fun of me, or I feel like I'm an outcast. Like, have you experienced that, and what advice can you offer anybody that's tuned in?
Yeah, I think it's weird because I see so many different aspects of students. You know, you have within our youth group, I mean, there's every type of kid you can imagine. You know, there's the cool kids, there's the kids that aren't cool, there's the ones that are jocks, there's the one that don't do sports at all. And so to me, I think the thing that I communicate to a lot of high school students, a lot of junior high students, is one, the world they're growing up in, I will probably, it's really hard for me to understand. Sorry. I have never and will never understand how, like, difficult their life has been because their life is put on blast through social media. Like,
Oh, right.
Oh, right.
it is so crazy to me. But if there's any encouragement I find, and I can find for junior high or high school students, is like being unapologetically you. I think a lot of high school students, I think even me when I was in high school, would look back and be like, yeah, I was kind of doing it for show. And I was doing it kind of out of to get attention from people. And I think if students can just accept who they are, that's a big thing. I think you don't realize that till you're in your 20s, you know, that you are, or like maybe even later in life, you know. But I think if people can unapologetically be themselves, then that's the best version that you could be for yourself, because you being yourself is you being yourself, and no one else is going to copy that.
Absolutely. And I always say that, and that's from the power of community, right? Because that nourishes you, that thrives you, and it helps you grow. Because if you're encouraging somebody to be unapologetically them and to share their gifts, and they're multifaceted as opposed to the one-dimensional, okay, you are a high school kid who is going to go to college and you are going to become a so-and-so, and you need to stay that course, versus being within a community. And I always use the word community, but in reality, it could be a men's ministry, women's ministry, young adult ministry, your life groups, whatever definition that looks like. But that nourishment and the comfort of having just a study there and people that you can walk life through. Again, that's such a pivotal time, junior high and high school, where there's so much judgment. And you had alluded to it. You throw in social media, it's throwing kerosene in the fire, and these poor kids feel so much judgment. So I can't imagine how many times during ministry nights where kids have come down, maybe breaking down and crying and coming to you with maybe the same things over and over, but the kids are different. How do you handle such raw emotion from them?
Yeah, I think honestly, the big thing that I think about is kind of talking about my own experience with them, and like, hey, junior high sucks, you know, like being straight up with them and just acknowledging like, yeah, this is a really hard part of your life. That's something that I've seen is, no, you're good. That's something I've seen is really powerful. Is I think if you can connect with someone in a way that tells them, I'm with you and I'm here to hear you out, and like just wrestle in that tension and be with them and just say, hey, I know this sucks, and like I've been there, you're experiencing it right now, and it's not going to be like that, you know, the rest of your life. That's like my big encouragement to students is I think like we get so caught up in what is social media saying, what is, you know, TikTok saying, what is all this stuff saying, and it's like, it doesn't really matter what that's saying, because that's not the definition of like who you are. It's what, and I think that's the thing, is a lot of people tend to lump what you do as who you are,
right,
instead of saying who I am is different than what I do.
Right.
My role at my church doesn't define everything about me. It is a aspect of my life. One, I mean, it is in one way, it's really hard to, it's blurring the line of personal life and work life. That's what I think really ministry is. but I think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really define me. I still have, my own beliefs. I still have my own passions. And me stepping up that stage that I step up on, or where I sit when I do church, doesn't define me. Like, the only thing that defines me really is what Jesus has done for me.
Amen. Absolutely. What was the last time you paddled out and you had a deep conversation with somebody about Jesus? So deep that sets would come in and you would pass up waves because this person, let's even go a step further. When was the last time you had this conversation with a non-Christian?
I think it's really interesting because, like I said, there's a lot of people in the Christian or the surf community that aren't Christian, but then I'm also really surprised by people that are. Like, guys that, that like look super rough around the edges. You're like, dude, this guy's like gnarly. And you're like, and he's like, oh yeah, I go to your church. And you're like, what? So I think like, not that I've had a lot of, I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that have some sort of belief in some higher being or creator. And I think what are the most life-giving conversations are the ones that I never would have expected that person to have that belief. And then we start talking about it and it's like, oh my gosh, like, and sometimes it's tidbits that we have in the lineup with each other of guys that I've known for 15 years. Or it's a conversation of, oh, like, what do you do for work? And then getting to have those conversations with people and just share with them that experience. I think I've had a lot of good conversations with my brother coaches a ton of kids for surfing. And so I get to have conversations with some of those parents that he's on the beach with, or some of the students that are maybe in junior high or high school. And we get to have that conversation like, hey, like, come check us out. Like, come hang out with us one night. And like, there's no pressure to keep on coming. Like, I am totally fine if you want to check it out once and you never want to come back again. So I've had a lot of good conversations in that sense. I think there is so much power in just even inviting. I think I think we've gotten so scared to invite. And even for me, it's really hard for me to invite because I'm like, hey, come to church. I'm going to be on stage and not be able to interact with you the entire time. Like, and so that's the tough part from my standpoint, but it's also like, hey, you should come. I'm going to be, hanging out with like our church staff and maybe you'll see me on stage and so that's something that I think I could definitely be better at, honestly.
I think we all could.
Yeah. Do you have a question for Jake?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah, but you can't see you though.
I know. Sorry, our baby.
No, you're all
good.
good.
Doing some things during this time.
Okay, I got another one. So, Jake, you mentor a lot of people and all these different facets, whether it's through surf, whether it's through FCC ministry, whether it's through family, maybe nieces, nephews, cousins. Talk about the importance of mentoring and who mentors you, because obviously there's faucets and drains, right? So it seems like a lot of people, you're pouring into a lot of people. So somebody needs to be pouring into you to make sure that you can pour into other people.
Yeah. So, man, I had amazing college experience where I have, some of the professors that I'll talk to every so often. I feel like even the other day I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have to email a couple of my professors to really learn more about cultural interpretations of scripture. And with everything that's happening in the world, I was going to like reach out and say, hey, like, I have no idea where to start. Just point me in the right direction. But yeah, I think, I mentor, like, there's definitely some kids that I mentor more than others, because one, they're asking for it and their parents are very involved with our ministries and they'll talk to me. But in some aspect, for sure, getting to be with the kids, getting to mentor. we have our executive pastor. He kind of takes me under his wing, and teaches me, and kind of, I've like 100% honest, I was pretty like, didn't really know how to do a lot of ministry stuff when I jumped in. And so our high school pastor, who just actually left, Kyle, he mentored me a lot. He was my supervisor for a long time. Also, just like, even like my friends that have been in ministry, Nate mentors me. My friend Alan mentors me. There's a collection. I think it's not like it's one person. I think there's different people. Like, my brother will speak into my life on certain topics, and then my parents have always been there to kind of give me a push, or even just, I can call them and have a real conversation about everything that's happening. And so I have a big kind of web of support. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned throughout this process and throughout even the last 6 months is just taking mental health seriously. I think that is so important. I think that's probably one of the aspects of my life that I ignored for a really long time. But I think knowing that now, and I've been kind of doing my own, reaching out to counselors and having just someone to talk to that's unbiased, has been it has boosted confidence and everything, and totally changed a lot of things in my life. And so that has been a huge help for me too. Just being honest with someone, just being able to, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is being honest and real with people, even if sometimes it's going to hurt. Even if it's hard, even if both of you cry, even if both of you laugh, I think honesty just is such an important thing that I think a lot of people dance around because they're scared to hurt their friends' feelings, but I think those hard conversations are the ones that I appreciate the most.
Oh, amen.
Sure, absolutely. And it's nice because, again, one of the things we talked about yesterday was this idea that you'd want to do a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd imagine the refinement and fire and having hard conversations with friends would be an incredible topic to start your podcast. Tell me about the idea of a podcast and what other goals and dreams, ambitions, things that you're thinking about in I guess the next 6 months from now to December, because the whole podcast thing, that's pretty neat that you're thinking about that.
Yeah. So I've always had this, pretty much since Bible college. I've always been drawn to biblical studies, and I always know that that's to me, that's really always a personal thing for people. I don't think it's necessarily always something you bring into the church, because I don't think if you have someone visiting on the weekend and you're let's just destroy this passage with the Greek, it's I don't think that's beneficial for everyone. And so to me, having those conversations is really important and beneficial for the people that are seeking those questions. And couple of my favorite authors, they do a podcast. It's called The Bible for Normal People. And it's Peter Enns and Jared Bias. And they're two guys that have really kind of freed up my thinking in a lot of things. And so I really like the model that they have of they bring a guest, it's them two, and they bring a guest on and just kind of chat, and they talk about, most of these people are biblical scholars that have a book coming out or something like that. But I've just even thought about bringing, my surf community of people that have faith, and talk about faith and surfing, and talk about, maybe dive into biblical studies, talk about what is changing in youth ministry at the moment. But yeah, it's just kind of something I've always, for the past year, I've just kind of been constantly thinking is it time? Is it time? So it's been something that's been kind of a stirring and trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
our daughter
amen.
thinks it's time because she just keeps, you're like, when is it time? When is it time? And my daughter's like, so that means yes. She's like, yes, yes,
She
yes.
votes yes.
She definitely votes yes. So,
Okay.
what do you think the time frame looks like? You know, there's a silver lining in COVID with all of us having the ability to electronically take data and digest sermons and podcasts and things of that nature. So, your wife, it's time. So it's almost like
do it.
it's almost like things are lining up for Jake to finally put the podcast into motion. What does the time frame look like? Is that more you praying and asking God for some guidance there, or is it more like, you know, I think a target date would be August, and I think I need to lay out this, and I think I need to lay out some guests. Like, what do you think of a time frame?
So it's really interesting because I actually read a book called gosh, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it, but Ryan Romeo wrote it, and it's all about he talks about how every single person in the world is creative. It's a phenomenal book if someone's kind of struggling with creativity. And he talks about being a creative person, and he says that there's not creative people in the world. All of us are creative. We just have to unlock it in our brain and kind of and like really kind of dive into it and step into it. It's called Head in the Clouds. That's what it's called.
Nice.
And his whole thing is like he wanted to be a music creator and a person that did all this worship stuff. And so he talks about building a model for it, writing a cost analysis of it, and to me, like, I pretty much have, you know, I know what equipment to buy. I know I have an idea of, you know, I have a list on our fridge of like guests that I would bring on. But it's just to me, it's the thing I'm trying to figure out is what's the target audience and what's the direction of where I want to go, and also thinking of just like a creative name as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of been a process of like thinking, okay, what does it look like to do something like that? And I actually got to be on our church's podcast that we were doing for a little bit with our youth worship leader as well, and our executive. So that was really cool. And that was a taste of it. I sent it to my family, and they were all stoked about it. I think if you look on my profile, it's linked on my profile, I think, on the Spotify for it.
Okay, and we can share that link too. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
people want to check it out, it talks about our experience growing up at FCC. But I sent it, and then like my sister's like, she's like totally into that. Like, I listen to podcasts, my whole family does. She's like, oh my gosh, you have the greatest podcast voice. I was like, what the heck?
There you go. See?
I was like, I don't know. And then, so yeah, it's just kind of like trying to think like what it's going to do.
Right.
And yeah, like who it will be for. And, yeah, I have an idea, but it's not like set in stone of like, this is a launch date, but I'm sure like once it gets to that point, I'll probably blast it pretty hard on social media, and I'll probably make a separate account for it and all that stuff. And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, we would look forward to that. I mean, you have a lot of comments that are encouraging that would want you to do it. I mean, especially from your wife, saying it's time. And our daughter started going crazy. I think you have that voice. Your voice is compelling to her. She just wants to talk back to you. That would be incredible. We would look forward to that in a heartbeat. Is there anything that any last minute advice that you want to give anybody that's dropped in? Anybody? Oh my hold on. Any advice for anybody new to this whole thing, or maybe anybody struggling, or just your thoughts, comments?
I think if anyone's kind of struggling with COVID, I think, or even just, you know, being stuck at home, or like, even to me, like wearing a mask kind of freaks me out. And like, if people feel, you know, anxious or anything like that, my thought to them, and my idea, something that I would want to share with them is, hey, we all feel it too. Like, I feel it. I'm sure you guys feel it. It's a scary time. It's an uncertain time. But like, to me, it's something that I've always recognized is like, no matter how bad it gets, like, I know that Jesus is sitting on the throne. Like, I know that at the end of the day, like, it sounds weird. At the end of the day, we win, like, we won. And so, like the victory is already achieved. And to me, like, that's encouraging. And I think that's like, I think a lot of people I think it probably makes it worse that this happened during an election year for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people get stressed about elections and all that stuff. And like, to me, something that I've realized about my own life is I've never put my trust in a human. I've never devoted myself to a president or anyone like that. And to me, I don't think that's like a smart idea. I think like the best thing you can do is devote yourself to Jesus, and because that is not going to go away. And I think in the midst of whether it's, you're in a storm and life is just crazy, I think like my encouragement is like, my hope, I can't promise that it will get better, but my hope is that it will. And I think a lot of us tend to see the negativity instead of the light at the end of the tunnel. And if we can start to see that light at the end of the tunnel, that gives us a lot of hope. And I think what the world needs right now is hope.
Absolutely.
Amen.
And I think the silver lining from this is, I look at it like a Venn diagram, right? So I look at us as one circle, and I look at you as one circle, where we're almost like two ships passing in the night. We both surf, we're both Christians, but we kind of surf different locations. We do different things, different types of churches and stuff. But we're cut from the same cloth. Like, we're big Star Wars nerds too. I love my wife because you love your wife. You know what I mean? Like, it's all these things. So the silver lining COVID-19 is this. Like, I probably wouldn't be doing this. And to have you on here just to talk story and to share what you've been doing in our community, I've always wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you because we've just been in those circles. But again, just our schedules have always just been going like this. And we met a couple times at Christian Surfers, and we had some talks, but never the way we could deep dive today. So I really appreciate this time, Jake.
Yeah, of course.
I can't even begin to tell you how much we appreciate this time.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it's I love doing this kind of stuff. It's fun for me because a lot of the stuff that I do is on brand with my church. We're kind of hustling together. We're all running together, but I think it's fun to do, some of my own personal ministry stuff too. And so that's and I think that is so important. And I think pastors need to be in the community. And I think, if people are struggling, like, reach out to either of us. We'll both pray for you. We'll come alongside you. And I think that is the beauty of it all.
Amen. Absolutely. Very well said. Well, Jake, thank you so much, guys. Jake is linked. You can always message Jake. He's at FCC. He's at the water at the pier. He's going to make his podcast. I'm actually going to give him a date so he can follow through with the date. There's so many things going on with Jake. Jake is like the most interesting man in the world, kind of busy. But he will make time for you. So if there's any questions, comments that you have, you're local to the area, you have kids that want to be a part of those types of ministries, please reach out to Jake. You can paddle out through the pier. Please reach out to Jake. You can reach out to us as well. So, awesome, cool. Jake. Thank you for your time. Are you good?
Yeah, everything sounds good. Thank you for sharing your heart, and we support you. We're praying for this podcast. We look forward to listening to it. Gracie included.
Yeah, you can say bye to Uncle Jake. You've been talking the whole time. You can say bye to Uncle Jake.
Come on, honey.
Over here, Mom. Bye, Uncle Jake. Jake, thanks again so much, man. We'll see you later. Thanks, man. See you.